Alara had never imagined that her life could spiral so quickly from disdain to dread. One moment she was a reluctant daughter in a household ruled by her stepmother's iron will, and the next she was being shoved into a marriage she had no part in choosing. The Alpha King, rumored to be broken, crippled, and unworthy, was waiting, and the weight of her stepmother's schemes pressed down on her like a suffocating shadow. She remembered the whispers, the way the servants had avoided looking her in the eye, and the rumors that had haunted the pack for years. Kale, the man who was supposed to be her prison, was said to be a man of immense power, but cursed with a twisted body, relying on a cane to move. How could anyone expect her to marry a man deemed perfect, forced into a union of duty and deception? And yet, when she finally saw him, standing tall despite the limp that betrayed nothing of the fire in his amber eyes, something shifted. A storm of fear, curiosity, and something darker, something magnetic, coursed through her veins. She realized, in that heartbeat, that the man the world had dismissed as weak was far more formidable than anyone could imagine. This marriage would change everything. The moon hung low over the misty forest, casting silver streaks across the sprawling Alpha estate. The scent of pine and earth mingled with the subtle tang of tension that seemed to cling to the air. Inside the grand hall, the wedding preparations were nothing short of regal. Gilded chandeliers, crimson velvet drapes, and a scent of white lilies that masked the underlying anxiety of the ceremony. Alara's hands trembled as she smoothed the silk of her wedding gown. Her reflection in the mirror betrayed a storm of emotions: fear, resentment, and a reluctant curiosity. Her stepmother, Lady Vera, stood behind her with a tight, calculating smile. "You look perfect, my dear," Vera said, though her eyes glinted with the cold satisfaction of someone who had orchestrated this moment for her own gain. "Remember, this marriage is not for love. The Alpha King may be limited in ways you can't yet comprehend, but his power, his pack, and his name, these are invaluable." Alara swallowed hard. She had always been cautious, always walked the line of survival in her family's toxic household, but this was a binding chain she had never imagined. A marriage not out of desire, but obligation, forced upon her by a woman who saw her as nothing more than a tool. The Alpha King Kyle awaited in the grand chamber where the ceremony was to take place. Rumors had already circulated through the pack Kale had been born with a disability, a twisted leg that left him partially reliant on a cane, and a limp that spoke of some cruel accident in his youth. Yet, despite the whispers, the strength in his amber eyes suggested that power ran deeper than physical form. As Alara stepped into the hall, whispers rippled among the assembled wolves and humans. Kale's gaze fell upon her. The moment was not like the tales of love at first sight. No, it was electric, charged with something heavier, darker, more magnetic. A storm was brewing behind those golden eyes, a storm that promised transformation in ways Alara could not yet fathom. The ceremony began with the usual formalities, vows recited with hollow politeness. Alara's mind wandered, torn between dread and an inexplicable pull toward Kale. When their hands finally touched to seal the bond, she felt it, a tremor of energy that ran from his fingers into her very core, as if the moon itself had lent its power to the Alpha King. After the ceremony, the night sky stretched infinitely, a black velvet canvas dotted with stars. Alara followed Kale into the chambers prepared for their first night together, every step heavy with apprehension. The room was decorated not with the sterility of duty, but with the warmth of subtle elegance. A fire crackled in the hearth, soft silks draped the bed, and the scent of cedar and lavender lingered in the air. Kale turned to her, leaning slightly on his cane, the shadows dancing across his strong jawline. "Alara," he said, his voice deep, commanding yet strangely tender. "I know why you fear me. I know the world has painted me as broken, but tonight you will see the truth." Alara's heart raced. The truth. What could a man, bound by whispers of weakness, possibly reveal that would shake the very foundation of her world? Kyle's hand brushed her cheek, warm and steady despite his physical limitations. The tension in the room was electric, thick enough to taste. And then, with a whisper that sent shivers down her spine, he leaned closer. "The night is ours," he murmured, "and I will show you strength you've never imagined." Alara's breath hitched. The storm behind Cal's eyes was no longer hidden. It roared with a promise of passion, dominance, and an intensity that transcended physical form. And in that moment she realized her stepmother's schemes, her fears, her doubts, they all meant nothing. Because the Alpha King, broken into the world, was about to make her world ignite in ways she could never have anticipated. The firelight flickered across the room, casting long shadows that danced on the walls like silent witnesses. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear, curiosity, and an undeniable pull toward the man standing before her. Kyle's amber eyes glimmered with a mix of command and tenderness, and though his cane leaned against the bedpost, it seemed irrelevant here, in the charged air between them. "Sit," he commanded softly, gesturing to a chair by the fire. His voice was steady, resonant, carrying authority that made Alara's knees ache with anticipation. She obeyed, every step heavy yet hesitant, as if the world itself held its breath. Cal approached, each movement careful but deliberate. When he reached her, he extended a hand, and for the first time, Alara noticed the strength in his grip, the controlled power coiled beneath his calm exterior. "I am not what the world thinks," he said, his voice low and intimate. "I am Alpha, yes, but my strength is not in legs or in appearances, it is in my mind, my will, and in the power of my pack. Tonight you will understand." Alara's pulse raced. The air between them was electric, each second stretching into eternity. Cale stepped closer, closing the distance, and rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine. Then, without warning, Cal pulled her into his arms. His embrace was not clumsy, not hesitant, no. It was the embrace of a man who knew precisely how to command, how to possess, and how to protect. Alara gasped, pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, the raw power barely contained in his body. And then it happened, the moment that would shatter every expectation Alara had ever held. Kyle's amber eyes seemed to glow in the firelight, a golden fire igniting within them. He whispered her name, her full name, like a spell, and suddenly, the room felt alive, charged with energy that neither of them had dared to name. "Alara." His voice was a growl, deep and mesmerizing. "Feel me, see me, I am more than what you or anyone has ever imagined." She felt it then, the surge of power, invisible yet tangible, coursing through him, through her, binding them in a pulse of overwhelming intensity. Her fear melted into awe. Every whispered word, every brush of his hand, seemed to awaken something primal within her. "Cale, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Something the world never expected," he said, his lips brushing hers in a fleeting, electric kiss that left her breathless. "I am Alpha not because of strength in my legs, but because of the strength in my blood, in my soul. Tonight you will see everything." He led her to the bed, not with haste but with deliberate, commanding grace. Each touch, each whispered command drew her closer, unraveling her doubts and fears. She realized in that moment, this man whom the world labeled broken was anything but. His power was fierce, untamed, and all-consuming. And then Kyle revealed the truth of his hidden ability, the mark of the Alpha, the wolf within him that no one had dared to acknowledge. A low growl resonated from his chest, vibrating through the room, and Alara saw the transformation begin, the subtle flare of energy around him, the aura of dominance and raw strength that radiated like heat. "Lara," he said, voice rough with restrained intensity, "tonight you are mine, not because you were forced to marry me, but because I choose you. And I will show you what it means to belong to an Alpha." The moment stretched, charged with tension, desire, and a power that defied logic. Alara's fear dissolved, replaced by a heady mixture of awe, attraction, and undeniable curiosity. For the first time since her stepmother had forced this marriage upon her, she felt something she had never expected: anticipation. Cal's hand found hers, gripping with a controlled strength that promised both protection and fire. "Trust me," he whispered, "and you will see that being mine is not a punishment, it is a gift." And in that dark, firelit room, with the world outside reduced to silence and shadow, Alara understood her life had just begun. The man everyone had dismissed as disabled, weak, and broken was about to show her a world of passion, power, and love she had never dared to imagine. The first night had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The fire crackled, sending embers dancing into the shadows as Alara sat on the edge of the bed, her pulse racing. Kyle's gaze never wavered, his amber eyes held her in place, a magnetic force she couldn't resist. Every breath he took seemed to synchronize with hers, every subtle movement carrying the weight of unspoken power. "You're afraid," Kale murmured, stepping closer. His cane clicked softly against the floor, a rhythm that somehow felt like a heartbeat in the quiet room. "But there is nothing to fear. Not from me, not tonight." Alara's hands shook as she tried to steady herself. I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the fire. Kyle's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "You already are," he said. "Every hesitation, every doubt, it's all part of what makes you mine. But you will see fear turns into trust, and trust becomes desire." He reached for her, and when his hands brushed hers, a jolt of electricity surged through her veins. It wasn't just the heat of skin against skin. It was something deeper, elemental, as if the wolf within him had whispered directly into her soul. "Lara, feel me," Kale commanded softly, his voice a low growl that made her knees weak. "Do not resist. Let yourself belong to this moment. To me." The words resonated inside her. Despite herself, Alara felt the tension within her unravel. She leaned into his touch, letting the warmth of his hands guide her, every motion deliberate, every brush of skin sending shivers down her spine. Kyle moved with a controlled, commanding grace, the power of his alpha presence wrapping around her like a cloak. He didn't need physical dominance. His very essence dictated control, and Alara found herself surrendering, not to weakness but to strength. "You are beautiful," Kale whispered, his lips barely grazing her temple. "And you will learn how much more you can be when you allow yourself to feel." The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, and the subtle curve of his lips that promised both danger and tenderness. Alara's breath hitched as he leaned closer, pressing a hand to the small of her back, guiding her gently to the bed. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Cal revealed the depth of his alpha power. A soft growl resonated from his chest, vibrating through the room, and a wave of warmth and energy enveloped Alara. She felt it in her bones, in her heart, a pull toward him that was more than physical. It was magnetic, primal, undeniable. He murmured, his voice rough with emotion, "You belong to me tonight, but not because you were forced. You belong to me because you will see what it means to be cherished, to be protected, to be desired like no one else has ever desired you." The words struck something deep within her. She realized then that Kale's disability, his limp, his cane, it was irrelevant. His strength, his power, his dominance were not measured by his legs but by his soul, his essence, and his command over the bond between them. As their lips met, softly at first, then with a fierce, consuming passion, Alara felt a fire ignite inside her, a wild, uncontainable blaze. Kale's hands roamed with careful authority, guiding, claiming, awakening desires she hadn't known existed. She gasped, shivered, and surrendered fully, finally understanding the truth of the Alpha King she had married. He whispered her name again, and in that single word, she felt the full weight of his devotion, his dominance, and the promise of nights like this yet to come. "You are mine," he said, voice low and commanding. "And you will learn just how strong an alpha's love can be." Alara clung to him, every doubt, every fear, every hesitation dissolving in the storm of passion, trust, and awakening. She realized with a shock of clarity that her stepmother's schemes, the forced marriage, the world's judgments, all of it, meant nothing in comparison to the intensity, the power, and the love Kale offered. In that room, under the fire's flickering glow, the disabled Alpha King shattered every expectation. He did not merely claim her body, he claimed her heart, her soul, and her deepest desires. And Alara, breathless and trembling, knew she would never be the same. The night stretched into hours, each moment a perfect storm of passion, trust, and the slow, intoxicating discovery of each other. By the time dawn began to brush the sky with silver, Alara understood Kyle was no ordinary man, and she was no ordinary bride. She was the woman chosen by the Alpha, the woman who had discovered the true power hidden behind his disability. And she would never look at him, or herself, the same way again. The first rays of dawn filtered through the tall windows of the Alpha estate, spilling gold across the lavish chambers. Elara lay awake, tangled in the silken sheets, her body still trembling from the intensity of the night. Kyle slept beside her, the soft rise and fall of his chest a reminder that the man who had seemed broken to the world was anything but. She traced her fingers over the contours of his face, remembering the moments when he had whispered her name, when his hands had claimed her in ways she had never imagined. Every sensation, every touch, every whispered word lingered like fire, igniting a hunger she could not suppress. Yet as much as the night had awakened desire, it had also awakened questions. Her stepmother's shadow loomed large in her mind. Lady Vera had orchestrated this marriage for reasons that went beyond mere family duty. She had wanted control over Kale's pack, over the power he commanded. And now Elara wondered, what price would she pay for this newfound bond with the Alpha King? Kale stirred, his amber eyes opening to meet hers. Despite the lingering warmth of sleep, the commanding presence in his gaze was undiminished. "Good morning, my Alpha," Elara murmured, a playful smirk tugging at her lips despite her lingering anxiety. Cal's lips quirked into a small smile, though his eyes remained sharp. "Good morning, mine," he said. The possessive tone made her pulse quicken. "How do you feel?" Elara hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Alive," she admitted finally, and overwhelmed. Cal's laugh was low, amused, and entirely magnetic. "That is the effect I have on those who are mine," he said, stretching slightly, the strength in his movements defying the world's assumptions. "You will grow accustomed to it, but for now enjoy it. Tonight, you felt a glimpse of what it means to belong to an Alpha." Elara nodded, though her thoughts were already racing ahead. She knew the pack would talk, that whispers of her first night with Kale would ripple through the halls like wildfire. And then there was her stepmother, calculating, ruthless Lady Vera, whose schemes were far from over. Kale, what if she... Elara began, her voice trailing as fear and doubt collided. Kyle placed a hand over hers, firm and reassuring. "Elara, whatever your stepmother has planned, whatever obstacles await, remember this: you are mine, and I will protect you. No one in this world can take that from you." The power behind his words settled over her like a shield, yet it also ignited a spark of defiance. Elara realized that she was no longer just a pawn in someone else's game. She had a stake in this, a voice, a presence that Kale respected and cherished. Later that morning, the first challenges began to emerge. Members of the pack gathered, whispers rippling through the hallways. Some greeted her politely, others with thinly veiled skepticism. Elara noticed the subtle glances, the judgmental stares aimed at the new Alpha Queen, the bride who had been forced into this marriage. Kale, however, met every challenge with quiet authority. A single look from him silenced doubts, a single word redirected disrespect. His disability, his cane, his limp, none of it mattered in the presence of the Alpha's true power, and Elara, standing at his side, realized that she too carried a part of that power, a reflection of his dominance that she was only beginning to understand. When Lady Vera arrived unexpectedly that afternoon, her presence sent a ripple of tension through the household. Her gaze fell on Elara with thinly veiled contempt. "I trust you are adjusting to your new life," she said, her voice smooth but laced with malice. Elara met her stepmother's gaze without flinching, surprising even herself. "I am," she replied firmly, "and I am learning what it truly means to be with an Alpha King." Vera's eyes narrowed, but Kale's hand on Elara's shoulder reminded everyone in the room who truly held the power. "Elara speaks the truth," Kale said, his voice calm but commanding. "Whatever schemes you have, Lady Vera, know that they will not touch her. Or me." The words hung in the air like a warning, and for the first time, Lady Vera seemed to hesitate. She bowed curtly, masking her frustration, and left, but the tension lingered. Elara knew this was only the beginning. As the sun climbed higher, casting light on the estate, Elara understood that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer a reluctant bride. She was the maid of the Alpha King, a woman who had survived the first night, embraced the power within her, and now stood ready to face the challenges her stepmother, the pack, and the world would throw at her. And Kale, strong, commanding, and more formidable than anyone had ever imagined, was by her side. Together, they would confront every shadow, every whisper, every scheme. And together, they would discover the full depth of the bond between an alpha king and the woman who had been forced, but now chose to stand beside him. The estate was alive with murmurs and movement. The pack had gathered in the main hall, summoned by Kale himself for a meeting. The tension was thick enough to taste. Eyes darted toward Elara, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed skepticism. She stood beside Kyle, her posture straight, her heart steady even as whispers threatened to unsettle her. Kyle's amber eyes scanned the crowd, calm yet commanding, his presence radiating authority that left no room for doubt. "We're at a turning point," he began, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the chatter like a blade. "There are challenges ahead, but our strength lies not in fear, but in unity." "And Elara," he said, turning to her with a gentle yet possessive gaze, "has proven she belongs by my side." The room fell silent. Elara felt the weight of every eye upon her. Some pack members shifted uneasily, unsure how to respond, but Cal's steady aura left no space for dissent. After the meeting, Elara found herself alone with Kale in the private gardens, the scent of night blooming jasmine wrapping around them. The first light of dawn glimmered through the trees, painting the scene in gold and silver. "You handled them well," Kale said, his voice low, brushing against her ear like silk. "You are stronger than you think." Elara's lips curved into a small smile, a mixture of pride and lingering anxiety. "I had you by my side," she admitted. "You make strength contagious." Kyle's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. "And you make trust possible," he whispered. The magnetic pull between them, already deepened by the intimacy of their first night, had grown into something far more profound, a connection that was emotional, mental, and primal all at once. But peace was fleeting. That evening a message arrived, a wolf from a rival pack, bearing a thinly veiled threat. The alpha of the neighboring territory sought to challenge Kyle's leadership, perhaps even to test his disabled status. Elara watched Cal read the message, the calm in his amber eyes masking the storm within. "They do not understand," he murmured, sliding his cane aside as he prepared to move with surprising swiftness and precision. "Strength is not always visible, Elara. And tonight, they will see why I'm alpha." Elara followed him to the training grounds, her pulse quickening with both fear and excitement. Cal's movements were fluid, almost predatory, as he demonstrated his combat prowess. Each strike, each maneuver, each command carried the authority of a true alpha, leaving no doubt about the power he wielded despite his limp. "Do not doubt me again," Cal said softly, his gaze locking onto hers. "The world may see me as broken, but I am whole in ways they will never understand. And you will see it too, in every moment we share." Later, in the privacy of their chambers, the intensity between them ignited once more. Elara's hands traced the lines of his face, feeling the muscles beneath, the heartbeat that was strong and unyielding. Kale leaned into her touch, eyes half-lidded with desire. "You are mine," he said, voice husky, "in every way that matters. And tonight I will remind you why." The night became a symphony of whispered names, heated glances, and the undeniable assertion of dominance and trust. Kale guided Elara with a perfect balance of control and tenderness, showing her the full depth of the alpha's power, not just in physicality, but in the overwhelming force of his presence and protection. Elara felt herself surrender completely, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because she wanted this, wanted him, and wanted to belong entirely to the man she had been forced to marry yet now chose with all her heart. By dawn, exhaustion and contentment mingled on the sheets. Elara's body still hummed with the memory of Kale's power, and in her heart she knew that no challenge, no rival, and no scheme could sever the bond that had been forged in fire, passion, and trust. And yet, even in this moment of closeness, a shadow loomed. Her stepmother had not given up. Lady Vera was watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike, one that could test the strength of the bond between the Alpha King and his mate. Elara closed her eyes, leaning against Kale's chest, feeling his heartbeat, his warmth, his dominance. Whatever trials came next, she realized she would face them not as a reluctant bride, but as the Alpha Queen, the woman who had survived the first night, embraced the Alpha, and discovered a power within herself that no one could ever take away.